What's up, everybody? Just want to do a quick review of this rifle I picked up. It is a Tikka T3X CTR stainless 24-inch barrel. As you can see, rifle's cleared, safe to check out. For the purposes of testing, I put on my 4-16 power primary arms. It's a good proven scope, budget scope, but works great. Might do a separate review on that at some point. But I've had it on a couple different rifles, holds 0 perfectly, so I like to use it for testing new rifles out. A little bit about the T3X. This is my first Tikka, and it's also my first 6.5 Creedmoor. Handled some Tikkas, they always felt great. Everyone talks about how smooth the bolt is, and it really is. It's the smoothest bolt on any rifle I've ever had, I'm sure. Really nothing else like it. I've handled some Remington 700s that had beautiful bolts, but they were rough compared to this. I'm usually a fan of controlled round feed. I like my Ruger M77s. It's usually my go-to action for hunting here in Alaska. It's robust, it extracts, it feeds, does everything I need it to. And they're fairly smooth for what they are. But this is on a whole nother level. Usually for just target shooting, having fun, I shoot my 308. I've always loved the 308. I've had great success hand loading for it and getting extremely accurate ammunition. And I get a kick out of using a budget rifle and hand loading for it, and on a good day maybe shoot a 1/4 inch group. I'm just tickled by doing that with an inexpensive rifle. And this is kind of along those lines too. Granted, it's not really an inexpensive rifle, but compared to higher end stuff, it's very affordable. I got a great deal on this one, so I couldn't really pass it up. I figured it was a good time to get a Tikka, and great time to try out the 6.5 Creedmoor. Everybody raves about. It's hard to argue with the numbers on the 6.5 Creedmoor. I put a cheap muzzle brake on here. It's $20. It's off of eBay. It's made in China. Did some initial testing with it with factory ammo, and really was not pleased with the results. It was mediocre at best. Shot 3 different types of Hornady ammo. First off, I tried the 147 grain ELDM. Pretty awful. Shot a 2-inch group with it. Got these backwards. First group was with 140 grain ELDM, and it was a 1.23 inch group. Not impressive. I was not impressed. And second ammo I tried, also Hornady, 147 grain ELDM, 2-inch group, awful. And then 143 grain ELDX with a 1.2 inch group, just not impressed at all. And looking at the numbers, I remember why I stopped buying factory ammunition and pretty much strictly hand load for all my rifles. Extreme spread of 62, standard deviation of 23.4 on the 147 grain, extreme spread 41, standard deviation of 16.7, and 143 grain, 73 feet per second extreme spread, 32.8 standard deviation. I mean, that's just awful. I hate to rag on Hornady because I love Hornady. I use a lot of their components and reloading equipment. Great luck with them, and I know people are shooting this stuff and getting great results, but man, those numbers are awful. One of the first things I do when I have a rifle that doesn't shoot that great is double check the torque on the action screws. Now I had this rifle torqued to the specs that are in the Tikka book that came with it, and they said 62 inch-pounds, which seems reasonable to me, coming from being a Ruger guy. Generally, M77s need to be torqued pretty heavily. So that seemed reasonable, but you know, with the groups being awful like that, usually the first place to check, you know, as long as the you know, the crown looks good, you've gone over the other things, you know it's not the scope. I actually put a different scope on it and shot some more. I put a 3-9, also a proven scope, and it shot the same. So I put my primary arms back on, and then I played with the torque on the action screws, and made a huge difference. On the 140 grain ELDM, tightened up a little bit, not all that much. What I did was, these groups are at 62 inch-pounds like the book says, and then I started off at 35 inch-pounds, shot about the same, changed the point of impact a little bit, but shot about the same. Then I went to 40 inch-pounds, and I went from a 2 with the 147 grain ELDM. I went from a 2-inch group to a 0.54 inch group. That's at 40 inch-pounds on the action screws. So awesome. I was tickled when I saw that. Okay, the rifle's not a dud, it just needs a little TLC. And then on the 143 grain, tighten the action screws down to 45 inch-pounds. Got about the same group as I did before, but then I shot another group of the 140 grain ELDM over here at 50 inch-pounds on the action screws, and shot a much better group. A half-inch group is right at 0.50. So 40 inch-pounds worked great, but my way of thinking, that's pretty light. I want them to be a little snugger than that, because this rifle is going to get used in the here in the Alaskan bush. So 40 inch-pounds is a little light. 50 worked great. Got even a little bit tighter group. 50 to me is reasonable. That's tight enough that it's not going to wiggle loose, but right where it needs to be for accuracy. And I also shot another group at 55 inch-pounds, and it went to hell again. So this rifle wants to be torqued at 50 inch-pounds on the action screws, and I'm good with that. So initially, my impression of this rifle was, good grief, you know, did I get a dud? Am I going to have to send this thing back to Tikka? They do have a 3-shot, one MOA guarantee, but on a rifle like this, I mean, really, half-inch is what I'm looking for, not 1 inch. And so, proved to myself that I can absolutely shoot half-inch groups with this rifle at 100 yards with this factory ammunition, with the absolutely horrible SDs and extreme spreads. And it's slow. I mean, 140 grain ELDM, 2649. It's another thing I've kind of learned about Tikka by doing my research into this, is that they tend to shoot about 100 feet per second slower than other comparable rifles, all else being equal, barrel length and everything. So it's just you know, something to think about with the Tikkas. They tend to shoot a little bit slower, but often are extremely accurate. Something I noticed when I checking out the rifle, preparing for hand loading, the throat on this rifle is extremely long. It's so long that with factory ammo, I'm jumping 150 thousandths, 200 thousandths at the factory, you know, cartridge overall length. So, and that's another thing that I've found in my research, is that they're kind of known for having a really long throat. So bullet selection becomes important. You're probably not going to be able to flirt with the lands on one of these rifles, because your bullet will fall out of the neck if you try and get close to the lands. So bullet selection, pretty important. You want to go with something that's going to be a little bit more jump tolerant. You know, a lot of the VLD style bullets, like the Burgers, want to be close to the lands, aren't at their peak accuracy if they're jumping a long ways, but a lot of traditionally shaped bullets work just fine on a big jump, and there's some exceptions too. A little bit more about the rifle. 0 MOA rail comes attached to it. Not really sure why they went with the 0 MOA instead of going with the 20 MOA built in. I mean, it is a 6.5 Creedmoor. You know, the rifle's kind of designed for long range target shooting, long range hunting. Never really been into long range hunting myself. Not necessarily opposed to it as long as the shooter knows what he's doing. I'm just absolutely against pot shots of any kind, or guys who go buy a rifle, slap a BDC scope on it and think they can go out and hit a caribou at 800 yards. Results in a lot of bad stuff. Results in three-legged caribou hobbling around and things like that. Caribou hunting is kind of what I had in mind for this rifle. I've found from personal experience that you do not need a 300 Winchester mag or really even a 30-06 to kill caribou with. They're a big animal, but they're not hard to kill. They're not nearly as tough or high-strung as like a white-tailed deer, in my opinion. For their size, you hit them where it counts, and they typically go right down. They don't take off running. There's usually very little blood trailing as long as it's a decent hit. So 6.5 Creedmoor, perfect for that. I'm primarily a meat hunter, so I've ruined some meat by using 375, 300 Win Mag. My other rifles that I love for using here in Alaska on moose and bear and stuff like that. So this will be for me, meat rifle, and also a good excuse for me to play around at the range. We have a 1,000-yard range close by. I can go and shoot within a couple miles of my house at 1,000 yards pretty much whenever I want. And then there's a great range not too far away with gongs and everything else. So, I've played around with the 308 at mid ranges, and I'm planning on doing a bunch of hand loading for this rifle and taking it out to 1,000 yards for practicing and just having fun. And then this year I'm going to work up a couple different loads for it, probably right away. A couple good hunting loads and a couple good target loads. And then we're going to see if we can take it out and harvest caribou with it. I'll probably be wearing a different scope at that point. But other than that, I'm not going to do a whole lot to the rifle. Shoots great. Now figured out the action torque, and I'll be doing some videos of the load development, and hope you tune in and check them out. And for the grand finale, we'll go out and hunt with this bad boy. Thank you much.